Her sister showed up at her door with 2 kids and a week's worth of demands. What happened next exposed years of manipulation that no one in the family wanted to admit. Erica Lawson sat at her parents' table, fork halfway to her mouth, when her sister dropped the announcement like it was already decided. The babysitter had canceled. Spring break was a mess, and Erica would be handling it. Not a question, not a request. A fact delivered between bites of dinner while everyone kept eating like nothing unusual had just been said. Her sister didn't even look at her when she spoke, just tossed the words into the air and waited for Erica to absorb them the way she always had before. For years, that silence had been Erica's cue to say yes, to rearrange her life around someone else's emergency, to prove she was the kind of person families could count on. But this time, the silence stretched. Because Erica had booked flights months ago, requested time off from work, split the cost of an oceanfront rental with friends, and set alarms to remind her when to check in for the flight that would take her as far from this dinner table as a few $100s could manage. Her parents exchanged a glance, the kind that said they already knew how this was supposed to end. They turned toward her, waiting. And for the first time in a long time, Erica said the word that would crack the family's unspoken rules wide open. No. If you want the full truth about what happened in that hallway, hit like, so this reaches people dealing with the same thing. It hadn't always been this heavy. When her sister Denise first had kids, the favors started small. An hour here, a grocery run there, just enough to make Erica feel helpful instead of used. But an hour turned into an afternoon, and afternoons became entire weekends where Erica found herself on someone else's couch, surrounded by toys she didn't buy and routines she didn't choose. Her parents saw her there so often they stopped asking if she had plans. They just assumed her time was open, that because she lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment without kids of her own, her schedule must be lighter, less valuable, easier to interrupt. Every time she hesitated, her sister would send a message loaded with phrases like, "You're the only one I trust," and "family helps family," words that felt warm at first, but colder every time they were used to corner her into another yes. Denise stopped asking and started sending schedules instead, texts that arrived like work orders, listing drop-off times and snack preferences as if Erica's calendar existed only to be filled in around her sister's life. One night, Erica had mandatory work training scheduled, the kind you can't skip without getting written up. Her sister called mid-panic, already halfway out the door, saying the backup had fallen through and there was no one else. Before Erica could finish explaining why tonight wouldn't work, there was a knock at her apartment and 2 small backpacks thumped onto the doormat. The training ran in the background on mute while Erica handed out snacks and refereed fights over a tablet, her own priorities shoved into a corner of the screen she wasn't allowed to touch. Comment boundaries, if you believe she had every right to protect her vacation. Spring break wasn't supposed to be complicated. It started as a joke in a group chat with college friends. Someone sent a beach photo with the caption, "Remember when we had time," and slowly turned into something real. They compared flight prices, argued over which weekend worked best, split the cost of a rental that had an ocean view and enough space for everyone to breathe. Erica moved her work schedule around, requested the days off weeks in advance, and watched her vacation hours disappear from the company portal one approval at a time. She told her sister about it because she was excited, because for once she had something to look forward to that didn't revolve around someone else's emergency. Denise asked practical questions about luggage and travel insurance, nodded along when Erica described the early flight and the rideshare she'd already scheduled to the airport. At no point did she mention that her own childcare was about to collapse, or that she was already planning to turn Erica's spring break into her solution. The week before the trip, Erica taped a packing list to her fridge and set multiple alarms on her phone to remind her when to check in for the flight. Her coworkers knew she'd be gone. Her manager had signed off. Her friends kept sending countdown screenshots. Everything was locked in, or so she thought. When her parents invited the family over for dinner that last Sunday, Erica showed up tired but determined to keep the evening calm. She didn't bring up the trip unless someone else did. She just wanted one quiet meal before she could finally leave. Her sister arrived late with both kids clinging to her legs and a bag of snacks swinging from one hand. She dropped the bag on the counter, greeted their parents, and settled into the rhythm of small talk like it was just another Sunday. Then, halfway through dinner, she leaned back on the couch and said it. The babysitter had canceled, spring break was going to be a disaster, and someone needed to step in. The pause that followed wasn't new. It was the same quiet space Erica had learned to fill with okay, and I'll figure it out for years. But this time, she said she was still going on her trip. No apology, no compromise, just the plain truth that her plans were not up for negotiation. Her sister's face changed in a way Erica had never seen before. Confusion first, then disbelief, then the kind of anger that doesn't need volume to fill a room. Denise started listing reasons. School was out, money was tight, her husband was on call, childcare in the area cost more than they could handle. Every sentence stacked higher until it sounded less like an explanation and more like evidence in a trial where Erica was already guilty. At the end of it, Denise said she thought family was supposed to be there when it mattered, and the words hung in the air like an accusation everyone was waiting for Erica to deny. That's when her dad stepped in, voice hard, asking why she was so selfish and why she only thought about herself. He didn't ask what she needed or why this trip mattered. He just wanted her to say she'd cancel, to prove she still knew her place in the family's unspoken order. Erica put her fork down, folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking, and said her answer wasn't going to change. She stood up, gathered her things, and walked out with her keys already in her hand, the sound of silence following her all the way to the car. Type yes if you think involving building management was the right move. The night after that dinner, Erica's phone exploded. Her sister sent a wall of text about exhaustion and responsibility, about how no one understood what her days looked like, and how she couldn't believe Erica would choose a trip over family. There was nothing in the message about the years Erica had already rearranged around her, nothing about the evenings lost to emergency babysitting or the weekends that disappeared into someone else's schedule. The family group chat turned into a crowded hallway of opinions. Her mom posted about meeting in the middle. Her dad wrote that they needed to be realistic and think about what was best for the kids. In his mind, being realistic always meant Erica was the one who had to give something up. Then her sister dropped a photo into the chat, a handwritten schedule for the entire week of spring break with Erica's name penciled into every margin. Drop-off times, bedtime routines, favorite snacks, arrows and circles and little stars next to activities she clearly expected Erica to handle. There wasn't a single question mark anywhere on the page. That's when Erica went downstairs to the leasing office and asked a simple question. What happens if someone tries to leave kids at your door without permission? The staff member, Blair, didn't flinch. She explained that residents weren't required to accept children they hadn't agreed to watch, that minors couldn't be left unattended in common areas, and that if it happened, the building expected you to call for help, not to silently absorb the problem. Hearing it laid out in calm, practical terms did something to Erica that years of family arguments never had. It made her realize that what she wanted wasn't dramatic or unreasonable. It was basic safety. Back upstairs, Erica sat at her kitchen table and wrote the note. She kept it sharp and plain. She would not be providing childcare during spring break, and leaving the kids outside her apartment would be treated as abandoning them in a hallway. She wrote that she would contact building management and request a welfare check if necessary. There were no apologies, no explanations, no soft edges her sister could twist into permission later, just boundaries and consequences. Share this so other people know they can protect their time without guilt. Erica woke before her alarm while planes roared faintly in the distance. Her suitcase stood by the door, backpack leaning against it, boarding pass printed and tucked inside next to the folded note. The apartment felt different with everything packed, like the room itself was preparing to let her go. Then she heard it, the elevator reaching her floor, the shuffle of small feet, the drag of bags, the low murmur of adult voices. They stopped right outside her door. A familiar knock came, harder the second time, followed by the soft thud of something being set down near the threshold. Through the peephole, Erica saw two backpacks lined up against her door and the tops of two small heads. Her sister stood over them, jaw tight, her husband beside her with one hand on a suitcase handle. Erica's pulse jumped, then steadied as she focused on the envelope in her hand. She bent down and slid it under the door, watching the edge of white paper disappear toward their shoes. Her sister picked it up, opened it in the hallway and read it. Confusion crossed her face first, then sharp disbelief that tightened her shoulders. Her husband leaned in to skim the lines, his mouth pressed into a flat, unhappy line. Their voices rose fast. Erica caught fragments through the door about family and loyalty, about turning something private into something official. The kids shifted their weight from foot to foot, glancing between the adults and the silent door that refused to open. This was the moment every earlier yes had trained them to expect a different answer. But the pressure in their voices didn't move her. She had given them her answer in words days ago. This was just the written version backed by rules that didn't care how long anyone had been leaning on her. Eventually, the noise shifted. Zippers rasped. Fabric scraped against the floor. The backpacks were lifted instead of being left behind, and the small cluster of bodies moved away from her door, footsteps fading toward the elevator. When Erica finally opened the door a few minutes later, the hallway was empty. The envelope lay on the floor just inside, pushed back under the threshold in a crumpled crease. She smoothed it out, folded it again, and placed it in the front pocket of her backpack alongside her boarding pass. If this whole situation shocked you, comment freedom below. The ride to the airport was quiet except for her phone buzzing steadily in her hand. Erica left the screen dark. She didn't need to read another message telling her she was selfish or demanding she reconsider. By the time she sat at the gate, surrounded by strangers wrestling with their own luggage and plans, her family's expectations felt smaller than they ever had. When the plane lifted off, San Diego shrank into a patchwork of streets and light beneath the wing, and for the first time in years, Erica realized no one could knock on her door. No one could push backpacks against it. No one could demand anything from her at 30,000 feet. Whatever they decided to say about her now would happen on the ground without her participation. Spring break didn't turn into some movie montage of healing. It just gave her a week where her name wasn't shorthand for free childcare. She slept without keeping one ear tuned for emergency texts. She spent slow mornings over coffee with friends who knew her as a person instead of a resource. When she talked about her plans or her job or what she wanted next year to look like, no one cut in to ask if she was free to help them that weekend. The absence of that question was louder than any apology she never got. When Erica came home, her apartment looked exactly the way she had left it. No bags, no toys, no signs that anyone had tried to test the boundaries she had set. A letter from the leasing office waited in her mailbox, a final version of the incident report she had already seen. It described the hallway scene in dry, careful language and confirmed that the building understood she had never consented to any of it. Reading those sentences felt like validation her family had never offered, someone outside the story agreeing that her limits were reasonable. Her sister stopped coming to her door after that. She shifted to talking about Erica in places she wasn't invited to, mostly at dinners with their parents, framing herself as exhausted and abandoned while Erica chose herself. But when they mentioned the building policy and the risk of leaving kids unattended, the tone at the table changed. For the first time, consequences were not just Erica's imagination or her threat. They were a measure of how close her sister had come to crossing a line none of them could pretend away. In the months that followed, their roles rearranged themselves. Her parents started planning their own visits with the kids instead of assuming Erica would always be available. The group chat went quiet on her end. She blocked it and kept a smaller thread open only with her parents, with one condition. If the conversation turned into a discussion about her choices, she would step back. She meant it. And when she stopped answering a few times and didn't rush back in to patch things up, they learned that the hard way. Cutting her sister out of her daily life didn't feel like revenge. It felt like finally believing her own side of the story. For years, Erica thought love meant absorbing whatever other people couldn't or wouldn't handle. Every time she said yes against her better judgment, she taught them that her time didn't cost anything. Saying no didn't suddenly change who they were, but it changed what she was willing to allow. Boundaries aren't about punishing other people. They're about protecting the parts of you that burn out when you hand them over too freely. Family can be a source of comfort, but it can also become the place where your generosity is treated like an obligation. When that happens, choosing yourself will look selfish to the very people who benefited from you never choosing yourself before. Erica is still figuring out what her life looks like without the constant pull to drop everything when someone else snaps their fingers. It's quieter now, sometimes lonelier, but it feels honest. Her time belongs to her again. Her peace does too. Hit like if you support her decision, comment what you would have done differently, and subscribe for more stories about people who finally chose themselves.